We are going to talk about functions today. So 5 things. What is a function? The types of function, the structure of a function. Then we will look at some examples. Then we ask the important question of why do we need functions in our code? Official definition. Take a second to read this chunky paragraph. Alright, now let's translate it into simple English. So functions are a set of codes that accepts inputs and returns outputs. So we call them factories. So they are a little bit like factories. Take in X, produce Y. For inputs, it could be values. So you could take in numbers. Or there could be no inputs. So once you call a function, nothing comes in, but something goes out. For output, you could either output a value, you could do something, like our command, that's a function. It prints the input onto the chart itself. Or it could return value and an action. Here's a visual representation of how it looks like. Our function, think of it as a factory, and the code in our function can be thought of like the assembly line of a factory. And this code is the one that takes in your inputs and changes it and produces this output. I know it may still be a bit confusing for you because you can't visualize how does a function look like in your code, but we are going to get there. So here we are. There are 2 types of functions, 2 main types. One are called user-defined functions. So these are created by us, the users of MT5. And there are inbuilt functions. These are created by MetaCodes, the company that created MQL5. So user-defined functions can be named however we want. I can call it Lucas Liu, sum and divide, Donkey Kong, for example. But the key thing is, functions have a set of parentheses. Alright? Parentheses, parentheses. This is how we separate a function from a variable. Variable could be just Lucas1, and that's it. But when you see Lucas1, parentheses, you know that that is a function. Some examples of inbuilt functions are command, copy rate, IMA. You should find this familiar. You have been using this all the while, just that you did not know they were called functions. So for functions, we want to know 2 important parts of it. First, you want to know how to call a function, how to use a function, how to send in inputs and return output. That's the first part. The second part is on building functions. We want to know how to build a function, and that only applies to our user-defined functions. We can't build built-in functions because they are already built in for us by MetaCodes. Alright, so this is about creating a function. And this part is coded outside of your onStart, onTake, onCalculate, onInit, onDinit areas. Right now, don't worry about the coding at all. We will talk about that later. So some examples of calling function. Let's say that I have a function called sum and divide. I want to use it. So in this case, I use it this way. Hello is a variable equals to sum and divide 1, 2, 3. So the output of sum and divide is being assigned to the variable hello. And 1, 2, 3 are the inputs of this function sum and divide. Another way to call a function. Right now I'm calling the function command. and the input is hello. The output is an action, so there isn't a need to assign anything to comment. Okay, this part is new. This is an example of how to build a function. So this area here is our code. And I have color coded it to show you what each part refers to. So when we build a function, we are essentially building our factory. We give it a name in green. We tell it what inputs to take in red. We tell it what output to return in purple. And we tell it the data type of our output in blue here. Alright, note that these bold words are not part of the code. These are just the names of the color coded areas. The structure of a function goes like this. So when you build it, put the output data type followed by name, parentheses, the inputs if any. If there are no inputs, leave it blank. And make sure that you have your data type as well beside each input. 2 curly braces, a return value. So in this case, sum and divide sums A and B and divides it by C. Let me rephrase that. A, it returns A plus B divided by C. So remember, in math, multiplication and division operation gets conducted first. So it is the same for this. So B divided by C, the answer will be added to A, and that would be our output. We are going to see more complicated functions later on, so don't worry about it right now. This is just to give you a brief overall understanding.